Coming up on the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast.
We did intermittent fasting, probably really started it up in the middle of March of 2020. And by Labor Day, 6 months or so later, I'm down 60 pounds. I go from 230 to 170 and I feel great. And some people look at me in this world that we live in and said, "Are you okay? Are you do you have some kind of a sickness or an illness or, God forbid?" And I said, "No, I feel great." And so they asked, "How'd you do it?" and all this. So I just get into the intermittent fasting thing and told them about it. And most of them gave me the same look that I gave that assistant coach that day, a year and a half earlier. But, to me, Brian, I found the intermittent fasting thing. It's essentially a fountain of youth to this now 63-year-old guy who I'm thinking, like, when I'm laying on that gurney after my hip replacement, like, I guess this is the end, and all these crazy thoughts that go through your mind. But, I found it and it's like, I still do it today. I basically eat 2 meals a day as a general rule of thumb and minimize to no snacking in between. Basically I eat lunch and dinner and I move a lot and I do some resistance training. And at 63, I feel as good now as I did when I was 40.
Hello, and welcome to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. I'm Brian Grin, and I'm here to give you actionable tips to get your body back to what it once was 5, 10, even 15 years ago. Each week, I'll give you an in-depth interview with a health expert from around the world to cut through the fluff and get you long-term sustainable results. This week, I interviewed 62-year-old Mac McKew. He lost 50 pounds through intermittent fasting, whole foods, and resistance training. Hopefully, Mac's story of weight loss and health will inspire you. He weighed 225 pounds in March of 2020. And on September 24th that same year, the scale read 172. Since then, he's been able to maintain his weight between 170 and 175. And he shares all his tips when it comes to getting started with intermittent fasting, his ways to avoid decision fatigue, and his daily routine when it comes to exercise and eating whole foods. Really enjoyed my interview with Mac. I know you will too. Thanks so much for listening and enjoy the show. All right, welcome to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. My name is Brian Grin, and I have Mac McKew on the podcast. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks for coming on. And this came about because I sent out an email to my email list and just sort of asked individuals or asked everyone if they had wanted to come on my podcast, and got a decent amount of return from that. And Max, I've been in touch with him through the years, and I thought it would be beneficial to bring him on and, hear his story, and maybe this will inspire you, sort of his health story and how he got results. And so I'm excited to have you on.
Appreciate it, Brian. So excited to be here.
Yeah. And Mac, where are you coming from?
The great city of Portland, Maine.
All right. Okay.
Up in the corner.
Up in the corner. And perhaps maybe give the audience a little bit background of yourself and sort of how you got into health and, I know intermittent fasting and things like that you've done through the years.
Yeah. No, I guess I look at intermittent fasting, Brian, as a lifesaver for me almost. And just to go back a few years, I'm 63 now, I'll be 64 this fall, but in the fall of 2019, probably about a month or so before my 60th birthday, I had a hip replacement surgery at that time, but I needed to get that done. Had it done in October of 2019, about a month before my 60th birthday. And, I had put on some weight, and what triggered it was I went to my primary care physician, had some, what I thought were back issues. And I'm a pretty regular guy over the years of going to a chiropractor. So it wasn't helping this particular issue. When he got me an x-ray and it showed like a bone spur type thing on my right hip. And, in today's world, it's like, it seems like they want to replace all parts and all that kind of stuff, which in this case they did, and in preparation for that, they said, get as light as you can, for the surgery and the post-surgery and the PT and all that, because you're going to be somewhat immobile following the surgery, and it'll take a little bit to get back to square one. So I got myself down to about like 215 pounds at the time of the surgery. I was around 215. My all-time high that I remember, though, I can tell you that was like 250 pounds back in around 2016 or so, a few years before that. I'd gotten weight off. I call it the old-fashioned American way. This diet, that diet, this diet, that diet, put it on, take it off, all that stuff. And anyway, I had the surgery done right before the holidays, somewhat immobile because you're going through the PT. And then the holidays hit. Of course, I've enjoyed my Thanksgiving. I enjoyed my Christmas and all the goodies and all that satisfaction that comes with it. And got my weight up to, and I remember this because everybody weighs themselves on New Year's Day because we all made resolutions to lose weight, right? So I tipped the scales at like 230. I added 15 pounds from October to then. And then, of course, in 2020, COVID comes along. And I'll always say that COVID, as crazy as this may sound, might have helped save my life in terms of the health piece, because they closed all the restaurants. And it was great because that kept me out of restaurants. I was never much of a takeout guy, and that was basically all you could do for, God, depending on where you lived, obviously, 6 months, 8 months. And my wife and I, the kids were out of the house at this point. They're adults now. And we said, we've got to do something. We can't let COVID, depress us, put us in a poor state of mind, all this kind of stuff. So we had a little home gym we put together in the cellar and did workouts 3 or 4 days a week. And that was great, feeling a little stronger, feeling a little bit better. But the nutrition piece still wasn't in line. It just wasn't there. And always struggled with it in the, as we call the standard American diet. It's a great acronym. What can I do now? What's the next trick I can do, to try to get the weight off? And I had done some research on intermittent fasting, and even had a friend that experienced it a couple of years prior. I used to be a high school baseball coach, and one of the assistants did it. And we were out at breakfast one day, and I said, "Hey, I'll buy you guys breakfast. We'll do a little, preseason meeting, talk about the team, all that." And he sat down. He said, "I'll have a black coffee." And I said, after that, and the other assistant, myself, I ordered a standard breakfast, and so did he. And I said, "Look, I'll buy you breakfast. Don't worry about it." He says, No, Coach, I'm doing intermittent fasting. And that was the first I heard about. That was like probably in 2018. And I said, "Well, what's that? Describe that to me." And he did within reason, eating window, fasting window, this type of stuff. And all he did was sit there and drink black coffee for about an hour and a half. So I got home that night and I'm thinking, geez, that's crazy, to do something like that. And then fast forward a year later, and I'm going to try it. I got to try something. I understand the general concept of it. And I sort of did it on my own, Brian, just based on research that I did. I've listened to a couple podcasts. I don't think I'd hit your podcast just yet, but there was a couple on, I think it was that Jen Stevens gal that wrote the book and on intermittent fasting. There was another gentleman from Australia, I think, that did something. So we did our thing, and we started doing intermittent fasting. My wife's wasn't overweight, but she sort of, she had to help me. And that's a very key thing to do, that your spouse, your partner, whatever, they need to be with you too, I think, on this. And anyway, we did intermittent fasting, probably really started it up in the middle of March of 2020. And by Labor Day, 6 months or so later, I'm down 60 pounds. I go from 230 to 170, and I feel great. And some people look at me in this world that we live in and said, "Are you okay? Are you like, you have some kind of a sickness or an illness, or, God forbid?" And I said, "No, I feel great." And so they asked, "How'd you do it?" and all this. So I just get into the intermittent fasting thing and told them about it. And most of them gave me the same look that I gave that assistant coach that day, a year and a half earlier. But, to me, Brian, I found the intermittent fasting thing. It's essentially a fountain of youth to this now 63-year-old guy, who I'm thinking, like, when I'm laying on that gurney after my hip replacement, like, I guess this is the end, and all these crazy thoughts that go through your mind. But, I found it, and it's like, I still do it today. I basically eat 2 meals a day as a general rule of thumb, and minimize to no snacking in between. Basically, I eat lunch and dinner, and I move a lot, and I do some resistance training. And at 63, I feel as good now as I did when I was 40. And I credit a lot of it to intermittent fasting. It gave me a plan to do it. And I've been able to execute it and live. And it's not really, I didn't have to eat it, order food in a box and eat this at this time and all. It's sort of a simple thing, sort of different levers that you can work to make it work to your schedule, to find what can work for you. And, other people saw me, and we could talk about it a little bit later, but I've worked with like 4 people, helping them, the ones that wanted to embrace the concept of intermittent fasting and really help some people ranging from the age of 23 to a 60-year-old getting some weight off. And I definitely want to put the plug in for you, because I Googled, I said, if people ask me for help, I better have some kind of credibility with this, even though I'm not a doctor. I didn't go to medical school. And I found you, and you have that intermittent fasting course. And I said, you know what? It wasn't, crazy money or anything. And I just need to be able to speak to it better, understand it better, to understand what I just did. So I took your course, as you know, and it was good. It was easy. It was very simple. It was fundamental. There's a lot of fundamental stuff. There's no, deep science to it. It was just good fundamental stuff. And I've taken it, and it just brought me mental credibility I can work with people on this now. And I'm in the middle of a different course right now, more intense health coaching type course, which is something that I may try to do when I retire in a couple more years from as I call it, my day job. And just be able to do that as sort of a side hustle in a sense, but help people, because I know how it helped me. I feel like I could live to 90 right now. That's how I feel. I just all through intermittent fasting. So sorry about the long-winded story about how did we get here, but that's sort of the Reader's Digest version of what I've done to this point.
No, thanks for sharing. And it's interesting when you talk about how COVID hit, and you had to sort of decide that you wanted to take action, and the fact that restaurants closed, I think you're not the first person that has said that, because going to restaurants, I always say is like, especially if it becomes just a habitual thing, can really be detrimental to individuals' health, even if they feel like they're eating healthy, because a lot of times, what they're cooking your food in and what they're putting in it really can just add up over time. So it's interesting that you say that, because I'm assuming then, as you started this journey, you just started cooking for yourself. Is that correct?
That's correct. Or I should say, I have to give my wife credit there. She's the better cook than I. But it was funny, because it's like I forgot how good of a cook she was until then, when we really just got back into much more whole foods and that type of stuff. And like, even when you come in, and even when the restaurants open back up, and like I tell the handful of people I've worked with, if you're going to go to a restaurant, you can't stop being social. You can't shut yourself off from the world and live in a cocoon. But it's like, I highly recommend that most restaurants, you can look at their menu online and take a look at it before you go. So you don't have that anxiety when you're looking at the menu to say, oh, geez, what can I eat on this thing? And, and don't be afraid to ask, maybe like, what oil do you cook this in? Stuff like that. Back in the day, it's like, I don't want to be that person at the table, but you know what? Health is important, and you can do it, smoothly. I think you learn how to do it smoothly. And I think what happens when you don't do that is, I've heard the term used, decision fatigue, right? You just like, I'm looking at this menu. I see, 8 things that I'd really like to get. Which one's the best one? Or can I tweak one of these to make it really fit my nutrition goals and that type of stuff. But I think the best thing you can do from a restaurant standpoint is know in advance what you're going to order before you get there. And I think that can save a lot of anxiety and things like that.
I love that tip. Yeah, it's fun. It's interesting. My wife and I don't go out to dinner a lot, but obviously you have to be social sometimes. So we do that. We do look at those menu before we go, probably 90% of the time, to see what they have and make sure there's something on there. Now, as you went on this journey, what type of obstacles did you run into, and how did you decide to sort of structure it around your schedule?
Well, I mean, the first thing, and I mentioned, of course, with COVID, we were somewhat, contained.
Yeah.
But I think what you need to do is like take a really good look at the food you currently have in the house, and one of the guys of this new course I'm taking, he calls the concept purge the pantry, and go through and really look at the foods that you currently have in the house, because it's the temptation factor. If it's in the room and it's in the room or in the kitchen, you're going to eventually succumb to it. You know what I mean? And just know, so get it out of the house. If you both agree that, we shouldn't eat this food, let's get rid of it. And I think it's setting yourself up to win by doing that versus, just if the temptation's there, you just eventually you're going to give in. And I don't think because we can talk about willpower and motivation, all those things are temporary. It's you got to build a discipline, so you got to build the environment that is going to give you the best chance for success. So we really started with that approach, and then brought more whole foods back into the house. And it's just, I forgot how good real food tasted. It got to that point, where you just forget, like, Jesus, there's nothing like a fresh salad, or go to the your local farmer's market, or go to an organic type place, and that stuff's real to me. I mean, you really your taste buds really change once you get off that processed food, sugar addiction type of a food, because that stuff just, once you start eating it, it's like, I don't know, that old Lay's potato chips commercial, right? You can't eat just one. You just keep popping them. And next thing you know, you're, 50 pounds overweight. So it's building that discipline, I think, coming out the gate, and knowing and eliminating, like I keep saying, that decision fatigue of what are we having for dinner tonight? I know today or tonight, as we do this call, I know what I'm having tomorrow, for lunch and dinner. It's not like what am I going to do this morning? Where's the food? What do I do? What are we going to buy? We're good. I mean, we're planning in advance.
Yeah, those are great tips. I mean, yeah, like you said, like if you don't buy it, you won't eat it.
Right. Exactly.
Make it difficult. It's like people who, and some people have kids at home, and there's maybe some junk around, and that can be a little bit challenging. But I think if you don't leave it on the counter, or maybe put it somewhere where it's more difficult to get to, like you said, it sort of sets you up for success, right off the bat. And then you mentioned whole foods. What is like a typical day of eating for yourself and for your wife? And I love how you also mentioned that you plan it out the night before, or even a couple days before. We do the same thing in our household. And what are sort of the things that you prioritize when you're planning out your meals?
Yeah. Like we said, the whole foods. I'm a big meat eater. I like a good steak. I like even shaved steak, and I love breakfast, as we know it, is my favorite meal. But so we just have breakfast for dinner. You know what I mean? We'll have an omelet. We'll have some kind of a protein with that, whether it's steak, it's chicken, whatever. Living here in Portland, Maine, we're right on the coast. We have some of the best seafood available. Shrimp's a great option. Low calorie, high protein. It's one of the best. To me, the two things are shrimp, and from a fruit standpoint is like blueberries, because I'm into like the low glycemic value fruits. Try to, not that you can't, not that fruits are bad for you, but some are tougher than others from a sugar standpoint. And like the berries, you focus on berries. I'll tell people blueberries, strawberries, raspberries, blackberries. And so we focus on that end on the fruit, and of course salads. So salad would be maybe a typical lunch with some kind of protein on it, whether it's shrimp or some steak tips or grilled chicken, just really fundamental stuff. And I think keeping it simple is that way. And then the breakfast for dinner approach, with, like I said, omelets or quiche or and the quiche is always crustless. You can make a crustless quiche to minimize the carb intake. So, we lean, I don't call it a keto thing per se, because I don't know what the real true definition of keto is. It depends, I think, who you ask, but, it leans toward a lower carb, but good carbs too, not the heavy breads. And the only bread I really eat is a brand called Ezekiel, which doesn't have any flour in it. And really the only good way to have that type of bread is toasted, because it sort of falls apart when it's just fresh. You got to freeze it too, to keep it. And we have that occasionally, like maybe whatever, poached egg with toast, and again, bacon. And we use the local butcher for our meat, and not so much the typical grocery store stuff. Not that it's bad, but you try to find those farmer market type environments. My wife, unfortunately, we eat a lot of eggs, and one of my wife's coworkers raises their own chicken. So we get, it's funny when you compare like a farm fresh egg to a store-bought egg. I mean, the density and the color of the yolk is so different. I mean, it's just like you scratch your head and say, how was that made versus how that was made? It really makes you wonder, how a lot of these mass-produced foods are done. And I think it's a really good, an example of a good eye-opener. But we're sort of all over the board. We try to, keep it mixed up a little bit, but in the same sense, keep it simple and fundamental,
Yeah, love that. And what would you say, when you started, condensing your eating times, was that something you started with, right? Because a lot of people ask me, well, should I start cleaning up my eating first, or should I close my window a little bit, or do at the same time? What was your sort of journey through that? How did you?
I did it at the same time, right? Because I think the sort of the fallacy or the failure with intermittent fasting is to think that if you create an 8 or 6 hour eating window that you can eat anything you want. That would be a big mistake. And then you might say, well, intermittent fasting doesn't work. Well, it does work, but that doesn't mean you can have anything you want. So, but when I started up, and lucky for me, I drank my coffee black anyway before I took up intermittent fasting. So that made that transition easier. But what I try to do is I'll have black coffee in the morning, but I try to get 20 ounces of water in me first. I'll get a Poland Spring water made in Poland Spring, Maine. So I got to put a plug in for Maine.
Oh, there you go.
So I'll drink a 20-ounce bottle of water, have coffee, and then and bring more water into work with me. And I use a product called LMNT. It's a supplement that has sodium, potassium, and magnesium in it. And I add 1 packet of that to my water. And what I found even early in the game with that was it sort of curbed my cravings, to eat. So I could, I started out with the intention of not eating until 11 a.m. and being done by 7 p.m. in the evening, which usually gave me at least 2.5 hours before I went to bed. I think that's a very important thing too, to really ratchet that down so that your digestive system isn't cranking when you're crawling into bed at night. So the LMNT I use, that really curbed it. And then I easily, probably after 10 days to 2 weeks of starting my intermittent fasting, I moved it to 1 p.m. And all of a sudden my 8-hour window became 6 hours. And it wasn't, for me, it was different. So it's not that easy. I won't say that everybody should just do that and it'll work, but that's how it worked for me. That's how I was successful. And most of the time, and even to this day, I'm having lunch around 1 and I'm done eating dinner by 7. So it's sort of a 6-hour window. Now I'm going to say once a month, maybe even twice a month sometimes, but I'll do a 36-hour fast where I just won't eat for 1 day. And basically, and when I'll do it is I don't try to schedule it, but if I know I'm going to take a flight to go see one of my sons lives in Omaha, Nebraska. So we may take a flight and I'm going, you know what? I don't have to. Today's a good day not to eat. I know that sounds crazy and people look at you, not to eat, so I'm not going to eat those bag of peanuts or pretzels on the airplane. I'll just drink my water and have my coffee. And by the time I travel, I get there and I'm almost ready to go to bed, or I'll go for a little walk. And then once I know I go to bed, the toughest part of that 36-hour fast is that dinner, that evening dinner that, I never have really a problem. I can skip lunch. Sometimes I only have 1 meal a day and it'll be dinner. But if I get through that dinner, I can do that 36-hour fast. And that one, just like some people say, you're nuts, you're crazy. I said, it's really, I have more energy on the morning after the all day of not eating It's an amazing thing. And I think people don't understand that about fasting, is that it's a good, like flushing of the cells. You know what I mean? It's just like, we're going to rebuild this, and you're going to be stronger when you come back, type. It sound like a superhero or something, but it's like, it's not that bad. And you'd be amazed how good you feel after you do that. It's hard for people to grasp, but I think you got to build up a fasting muscle, I'll call it, to get to that point. Don't do that on day one. You'll set up for failure. But so I've got that built in too, and I still do it to these days. I mean, I got to I won't even call it a goal weight. I got to the weight that I was comfortable at, and have been there. It'll be 3 years this fall, and I haven't changed my lifestyle. I probably ate before 11 a.m. maybe once in those 3 years, and I don't think anything of it. It's not like I'm white knuckled, all morning waiting for 1 o'clock to arrive. I don't even think about it. It's just, I think we were so conditioned growing up that it's 3 meals. And then somebody said, let's even add some snacks to that. And now we look and we ask ourselves, why is, whatever the number is, believe what, 75% of the United States overweight. We eat a lot. That's what we do. So.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I mean, I think a lot could be learned from sort of your journey, and like you said, I think you want to sort of ease your way into it. I know when I first started doing some fasting, I definitely slowly pushed back that first meal, and for some people they could just cold turkey it and do it right the next day. But like you said, you want to sort of set yourself up for success, and one way to do that is to sort of ease into it. And also, too, I always tell people there's no perfect window. Like, if you want to have breakfast and lunch, and that works for you. I think the biggest thing a lot of times for people is when they skip that, let's just say that first meal. A lot of times in that first meal, they're on the run, they're rushing, and they're having a lot of just processed food in general. You think about a typical standard American diet for breakfast: muffins, croissants, hash browns, things like pancakes. Sure. Yeah, so those food, aren't going to serve you too well, and so I think just eliminating that in itself can go a long way.
No question. And like you said, most breakfasts happen fast, and a lot of them happen in a drive-through, and that's typically not a good option, generally speaking.
And what would you say? If there were any obstacles that came, or just like little things that you ran into when you first started, or were there, and what'd you do to overcome them?
Yeah, I mean, probably the only thing, Brian, I can really think of, and like I said, again, my timing was good in the sense of COVID, because there weren't a lot of social opportunities. We all can't wait for the next COVID to come along to start intermittent fasting, but I think the biggest challenge becomes, most people are social and they're going to go out, and, like one of the things I, have minimal, like is alcohol. I'll have an occasional glass of wine, that type of thing, maybe a Miller Lite or something like that. But I mean, I don't even think I can handle 2 drinks now, because my body's changed, and I'm a little lighter, I'm a little older, all that kind of stuff. But it's just, as I sort of tongue in cheek with people, I says, look, I don't have to have a drink or eat those fried clams or whatever to be a fun guy. I'm still a fun guy. You know what I mean? When you go out, and it's just sort of working through that and knowing that you're sort of going against the social norm, and when you're in a restaurant, or you're going out with friends, or going to an event. And I don't I'll have a piece of birthday cake. I think that this kind of stuff and these type of programs, if you try to be perfect at it, you'll probably fail. But if you can be consistent at it, and one of probably my favorite book of all time was the book Atomic Habits by James Clear. And he talks about, changing your habits and building new habits. And, he's the one that said, you got to get temptations out of the environment. Other people have said it, but I read it there. And, you talk about, he called it, don't swing and miss twice. So, all right, maybe you have a bad meal in terms of the amount of carbs or the sugar that's in it. Don't let that ruin your day. Don't let that roll into tomorrow and you do it again. And you're gonna trip a little bit. It's the 80-20 rule. If you get it right 80% of the time, everything's going to be fine. Don't try to be perfect. Don't get discouraged if you trip a little bit. It's going to happen, but just get up quickly and regroup and go back to doing what you were doing. And I think the strategy that worked for me and what I did with a few people was, look, when you're in your, what I'll call, transformation portion of this intermittent fasting, because you're probably doing it in most cases to lose weight. It really has other benefits beyond that, but that's what's going to get people sort of initiated in it, is that I think you want to be more disciplined because you want to see results. You want to see success. So, you're probably you should be a little bit more disciplined. And then when you get to that, if you want to call it a goal weight, I'm not big on the weight itself more than the feeling. And, if your pants feel better on you, you need to get, you need to drop 2 sizes down or whatever. The mirror never lies, as we know. Really look in the mirror more than get hung up on the scale. But it's like, get focused during your transformation. And when you get there, and I hate to talk about, I don't like moderation. You can have that in moderation. I think that's a little too loose. But I'd say, like, don't be afraid to have a slice of birthday cake if you're at it, but remember, it's a slice of birthday cake, not a quarter of the cake. Have a slice of birthday cake and learn to understand that that's it. This was a very special occasion. I hate the comments or I hate the term cheat meal. I think it's very misleading and it can lead you down a bad path. I mean, I'd rather think of it as a one-off. It doesn't have to happen every Saturday night's my cheat meal. A lot of people sort of approach things that way. I think you're better off, okay, this is a special event. And if once you've transformed your body and your mental state, because this really helps your mental, capability as much as it does your physical, by getting in good physical shape, is like, just focus during the transformation and then be smart during maintenance. When you're in that range of good weight and feeling good, because just look at your before picture. I just sort of tell people, just look at your before picture. You don't want to go back there. You don't, and that's enough motivation for a lot of people. And this stuff can, sort of cascade. And I do want to tell a couple of quick stories. One of my friends, his son was I'm sure by medical definition morbidly obese. He was 22 years old. Went to the University of Maine. Of course, they shut down during COVID. They send all the students home, and you can work from your bedroom online. And he mentioned to my friend, he says, "Geez, Mac looks. How did he do it? What did he do?" He says, "I need to change." So I met with him, and we got together, and I said, "First of all, Luke, kid's name is Luke." I said, "Why are you here?" He goes, "I've got to change something, or I'm going to die really young." And he weighed, at the age of 22, right, he weighed 300 pounds. And it wasn't because he was the offensive lineman for the football team. It was just a lot of poor habits and eating that had built up. And then you threw the COVID thing, which negatively affected him because now he's inside, he's in his bedroom, all his classes are online. It's like he really left the room. It was almost like being a hermit. So I didn't have any great approach to it other than what I did. So I sort of went through what I did. And he took this thing like an extremist. And I said, let's focus on getting you down to 2 meals with minimal to no snacking. I say play the game. We did the 10,000 step thing. I want you to do 10, build yourself up to 10,000 steps a day. Let's shoot for 5,000 to start. He got up there quickly. It wasn't that he was just carrying a lot of weight. And Brian, I'll tell you, and this was in 2022, and I tracked it for him. And I think I look at myself as an accountability person. You want to work with me? Okay, I'm just going to make you accountable. You have to be committed. I can't, I can motivate you for a little bit, might work for a day or two, but you've got to be committed to wanting to change and write down all your whys. We always talk about, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this? Write them down on paper and hang them on the refrigerator, or put them on your laptop, tape it to your laptop or what have you. And he lost, in 6.5 months, he lost 100 pounds. I mean, it was just, and it wasn't in a bad way. And he's maintained it since. His life changed. Forget the weight, forget the 100 pounds. his whole life and the way he sees life changed.
Confidence, right?
Yeah, it's confidence. And this was a 22-year-old. And I've worked with 3 or 4 other people. And frankly, and I'd say this in total sincerity, another plug to you. I took that class, and what you offer in that class is an approach, sort of a documented approach. With some of these guys are so technology, all these younger people are all over it. Instead of you writing food down in a journal, I introduced them to MyFitnessPal. You can, however you want to do it. I think, and I don't want to get people hung up on counting calories, because that never lasts. You won't sustain it. But sometimes at first, when you're starting out, just start doing it at first so you understand how much you're eating. Sometimes I don't think you realize how much you shovel in. You go to a restaurant, of course, they give you 2 servings of everything, and it's almost like an all-you-can-eat food fest. It's like, how much are you taking in? Measure it for a while so you understand. And that's what he did. And then he got so disciplined. Basically, he ate almost the same thing for lunch and the same thing for dinner every day. And as crazy as it sounds, I mean, that might be extremist, but he took the decision fatigue out of play. I can tell you that. He didn't have to worry about what he was going to have. And, it was like basically his first meal was like around noon. It was basically eggs and some kind of meat or protein. And then his dinner was like a chicken breast or a stuffed chicken breast. And some vegetables, some greens. And he did that for like 6 months, and it fell right off him. I think that just shows you how bad he was eating, and 2, how good you can do when you really dial it in, which is sort of an extreme way of dialing it in. But, it worked for him. It worked for him. And now he's in a maintenance mode where he's probably got a little bit of flexibility in there. I always said anytime I'll reach out to him like randomly, and I'll tell him, send me your weight. Just out of the blue. So it's like, it's a surprise. It's not like next Tuesday, Mac's going to ask how much I weigh. So I'm going to do a 36-hour fast or something to make sure I'm at my best number. But it's just that accountability. I think we all need to be held accountable to some degree. It's great that if you're really self-disciplined and all that, but most of the world isn't. And I think things like health coaches, people like yourself, we just need it. It's better than a doctor as far as I'm concerned, or it's a nice supplement to a doctor. Let me say that, because I don't want to, tick off any medical professionals. That's not my goal. We need them. They're important. But I think that, and some of them, the younger ones now are finally, I think, seeing through this and seeing the importance of it. And, I'm just thrilled about it. I'm excited about it. I love talking about it. As you probably get a sense for it. It's just like, let's change the world by improving how we eat and what we eat, and it's an amazing thing. I will say the old saying growing up for me was sound mind, sound body. I flip it. Sound body, sound mind. I'd like, I think when you feel good about yourself, when you like the person that's in the mirror, this changes versus the other way around. I really think it works that way. At least that's my experience.
Yeah, that's quite the story. And I do like how you mentioned that, and I agree. I think at the beginning of someone's health journey, recording what they're eating, when they're eating, their other habits that are going on are important. It's not like you need to do that for the rest of your life, but at least initially, it's good to have an idea. Because like you said, a lot of times we eat out of boredom or stress, and we don't even realize we're eating half the time. And
right, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, that's a great thing to do right off the bat. And like you said, there's plenty of apps. For me, I started with more of like a journal, like, that, people can utilize along with the course. But any type of tool, if it's just a notebook, whatever it is, it doesn't have to be a fancy journal. But that's a great place to sort of start and get at least a baseline of caloric intake. So you just know where you're at. Now, last piece of this is, eating whole foods, like you mentioned, cooking for yourself, creating some type of structure with fasting. And then you got into resistance training. What was your journey regarding that?
Well, we started out, my wife and I, now with COVID, a lot of the gyms were closed, obviously, at the same time. But ours is more, we're not bench pressing 300 pounds or anything. I'm 63, she's 61. So most of it's body weight. It's push-ups and whether she does them, on her knees or on an incline, where to take some of the weight off. We utilize the TRX straps, for body weight exercises.
Mm-hmm.
We use a lot of bands. And then we, like for squatting and stuff like that, I'm not throwing any weight on my back, but so we use like a landmine approach where we stick that barbell, in a apparatus and do our squats with that. And, again, when you're younger, you probably have more flexibility. You're going to lose some flexibility as you get older, but I'll use like a wedge under my heels when I'm doing the squats. I'm not trying to, I want the movement. I'm definitely going to strengthen the muscles or at least keep them there, because as we know, as we get older, you're going to lose some muscle, you're going to lose some tone. And I would put, as much as the fasting and cleaning up the diet is very important. But the resistance training is, I think, such a key. It's don't forget about it. Don't like skip it. Just what we started doing at first during COVID was we would do like 3 days where we sort of separated, we did the body parts. We did like chest, shoulders, and triceps on one day. Then we did back, biceps the next day, and then legs the third day, and then take a day off. We switched that up because that got like almost too much, because we basically do it every other day. So we do a workout, and we try to do it in time too, because we try to do it like 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. It really is what we try to knock it out in 30 minutes on off days, if you will. We're always moving. We're always playing the game of steps and making sure we're getting movement all day, every day. Mm-hmm. But the other thing that we try to do like every 10 days to 2 weeks is like it's like a sprint type workout. And I don't mean sprint necessarily in the sense of literally sprinting. That might be it. You might go find a hill and run up a hill 4 times or whatever, but getting that heart rate up, that high intensity training, the HIIT training, whatever the terminology is, maybe on a treadmill where you ramp it up to whatever, 8 miles an hour, which is a sprint for me, and then bring it back down to a walking 3 and back up. And, that up and down thing, the Tabata stuff, we do a little bit of that. I just fire up the app. Thank God for technology, and then hit the start button and have like 4 exercises set up for those, those 20-second periods. I think it's 20, 10, 20, that, and you just do it for like whatever, 4 minutes, and then another set of 4 minutes, and just, not a lot of that, maybe once every 10 days for me, being now we're in our 60s, but I think it's good that you can remind your heart that you can get up to that rate and not worry. If you can't do it every day, but you can do that, like every 10 days to 2 weeks. But it's movement, it's resistance training. I'm on the fence, and I know you're a promoter, but I'm not saying on the fence. I just don't know if I want to dive in. That X3, that variable resistance training with the bands. I've got some bands at home, but I mean, I think I look at that thing twice a week. Geez, do I want to buy this? Do I want to buy this? And it's like, because he makes it look so easy in terms of the 10-minute workout, which is attractive to me, and it's portable, and you can bring it with you when you travel, and those kind of things. So that might be the next thing I dive into. But I think bands are when you're younger and you're in the gym with all the big guys, it's like, geez, if you're using bands, I don't know, you sort of looked at differently. But boy, you can get a heck of a workout with bands, and I don't care anymore what people think. I'll use bands and go from there.
I mean, I love how you talk about resistance training, and I think that finding a routine that's something that you could do weekly, like 3 days a week, I think is a good place to start for most people. Even 2 days a week if you're not doing any lifting at all, easier way into it. But yeah, I mean, the bands system X3 is a great place to start. I mean, there's other systems out there. I've had Dr. Jaquish on my podcast a few times already, the developer of it. And I like to mix it up. It's something I used when COVID hit. I was using it a lot in my basement, and I still do. Sometimes I'll do traditional lifting. Sometimes I'll go back to doing some variable resistance with the X3. But, they're both great options. I mean, body weight exercises, like you mentioned, are a great place to start too.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I think that, from what you've told us, I mean, obviously, the changes that you made obviously are awesome. I mean, you went from weighing, at your most, you were 250. And then in March of 2020, you were 225. And now you're between, what are you at, 175 right now?
Yeah, 170, 175. I'm just, your body's going to go 5 pounds either way because of water retention or whatever. But yeah, I'm right around that area for it'll be going on 3 years this fall. And, feel great. And, you're locked into it. And you know what you did to get here from the transformation piece that you just, you want maintenance. And then when you hit this, right. So I guess you're never too old, I guess, is my lesson. I didn't get back into this stuff until I was 60. I mean, I played college baseball at Division III level. I did some coaching. So it wasn't that I wasn't around athletics or I never worked out. Mm-hmm. In the early 2000s, I've run 4 marathons in a 6-year period in my life. So it wasn't like I would never touched a weight or did any kind of exercise. The nutrition piece was really always it's almost confusing over the years because things have changed so much. Eat this, don't eat that. Eat this, don't do this, don't do that. It's just confusing to people. And I think the simplicity of intermittent fasting and eating whole foods is just a very good place to start. And I don't care if you're 60 or if you're 40 or whatever age you are, you can reverse things, I think, quicker than you think. I really think you can. And whether you've been healthy your whole life, or, in my case, I as I say, I sort of get on the treadmill, the rat race, married, 3 kids, raising kids, traveling a lot in my job, the proverbial rat race. And then the dust finally settled. There's got to be a way. Don't wait till you're 60. If you're younger and you're listening to this, don't wait until you're 60. But if you are 60, you can still do it. You can still make changes. I want to live to be 90. We just had our first grandchild a little over a month ago. I want to play with her and have fun with her and run around with her. That's my motivation. My goal for longevity. I don't want to be, sitting in a chair or just, being sedentary. It's never too late and it's never too early. I mean, start up. Just don't forget the importance of your health and your fitness, because it changes everything else in your life. And I think when you really put that in your mind, or really plant that in your mind, it makes such a difference. And everything in your life changes. Your relationships are better. The way you work is better. You get more energy. It's just the right place to start as far as I'm concerned.
Love that. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Mac. It's never too late. I like that. And I know that you're doing some coaching, just a little bit on the side. Yep. And is there a place for people to find you if they want to learn about you?
I mean, I'm on Facebook. Okay. If you want to put my email address in your show notes, that's fine. Right. If people want to reach out, love to help people. I'm not taking on a lot of people right now, because like I said, hopefully my goal one day is to, when I retire from I guess I'll call it the real world, is to do some health coaching with folks. And I don't care if I'm 65 at the time or whatever. I plan to be here. It helps motivate me. It's that whole thing of motivating each other. It keeps me engaged, and there's no better feeling in the world than helping a person. I mean, I think for a lot of people, there's such a satisfaction with that. I don't need to do it to make $1 million. That's not the goal at all. It's just helping people, knowing how much better I feel after an improved journey toward health. I want to see other people do the same thing. You don't know what you're missing. I guess that's the best way to put it. You don't know what you're missing. And whatever, if anybody wants to reach out, that's fine. You can, like I said, you can find me on Facebook or shoot me an email, and we can have a conversation if anyone wants to. But I mean, I love it. Just want to make the world a healthier place. And I know that's exactly what you want to do, Brian. So I want to join the crowd with you.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll definitely put a link in the show notes for to connect with you if people want to reach out and just chat or get some help from yourself. Yeah. And I want to just say I appreciate you reached out to me through the years and most recently. And I think sometimes when you do things, like a podcast or you send out content, you don't really know who you're affecting or who's really reading it, right? I mean, sometimes you do, because people do respond, you get comments and you do get some emails, but it's few and far between. And so the fact that you've been obviously responding back and sharing your story with me, that to me, that motivates me and makes me, want to continue to do the things that I do. So I appreciate that.
No, definitely, Brian. You do a great job with it. And again, we're just out there trying to, we want to be the norm, not the, the oddball or whatever you want to, we want to be the norm. And there's a whole other part of life when you're as healthy as you can be.
Great, Mac. Well, thank you for coming on and sharing all your knowledge and your story.
Perfect. I appreciate it, Brian.
Thanks for listening to the Get Lean, Eat Clean podcast. I understand there are millions of other podcasts out there, and you've chosen to listen to mine, and I appreciate that. Check out the show notes at briangrin.com for everything that was mentioned in this episode. Feel free to subscribe to the podcast and share it with a friend or family member that's looking to get their body back to what it once was. Thanks again, and have a great day.